I'm Good Old JM. This is the JM Report, coming to you from CSB Studios in Tampa, Florida, the birthplace of pro wrestling. And it's good to be back in the studios, considering that my last episode, I had to do it from the comfort of my own home. But it's good to be back here in CSB Studios. So All In was, let's just say, it was a kick-ass show. It delivered. It was beyond expectations, or whatever the phrase is. And it was just such an amazing show. People, including myself, were practically begging for some more. And there isn't enough praises in the world to pass on to Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks, and anyone else really that was involved behind the scenes, delivering All In, whether it's from a production point of view or even a setting point of view, with the staging, with the lighting, with the pyros. It was all amazing from start to finish, even with their own pregame show, if you will, 0 Hour on WGN America, which pulled about 200,000 viewers. And not bad. Not bad at all. And it wasn't even on a primetime spot, so imagine that, how much more it could have gotten. But altogether, it was about a 5-hour event from start to finish. And some people had difficulties in the beginning of the pay-per-view event itself. There were many reports, even a few tweets online, that people having difficulties viewing it. Not sure if that had anything to do with the signal itself, or that individual's streaming services and the way it was connecting with the Wi-Fi and this and that. But it only lasted for a few minutes. If anything, the fans missed out on the opening video package and the shot of the crowd, and of course, the national anthem being sung live. But they were able to tune in right on time to catch the opening match and see it through the end, because they literally ended the main event with seconds to spare. A lot of people were saying 3 seconds. I didn't time it, but it was very close. After the 3 count, after the celebration, and you get, again, shots of the crowd and the wrestlers in the ring celebrating, raising their arms in the air, high-fiving, hugging, because they knew it was a success. Even long before the event started, they knew it was a success, and everyone's just getting emotional. They did it. And Coop cut the feed, pops up the copyright logo and whatnot, all rights reserved, and they went off the air. They got everything in just in the nick of time. And I'm just going to run down the card here of each match, who was victorious, what cameos we've seen. And right off the bat, I'm just going to say there was no CM Punk. He was with Pro Wrestling Tees gift shop, or the retail store they have out in Chicago, doing I should say, a meet and greet, take pictures, autograph signing and everything. And that lasted for nearly 7 hours, as reports are saying. And the lines were as long as 6 blocks. 6 blocks. Not even Michael Jackson during his heyday. And I know, because when his album Invincible dropped, I was on the line to see him in person in Times Square at the Virgin Record Store. The line went around the block, and it never moved. It never moved. Apparently, there was another line further down, and that was the only one that moved. Most of them were VIPs or whatever. And by the time me and my friend got to the front, it was all over. And we were pissed, because we had passes, and we didn't pay for them or anything. We just showed up at the store at a specific time and date. And if you were given a pass, you were guaranteed to see Michael Jackson. And thankfully, we weren't the only ones, because there were hundreds of people that were turned away. And we left just as it turns out on television. We saw later on, Jackson came out through the front entrance and stood from the inside of his limousine, but popped out his head through the sunroof, started waving to his fans or whatever. So anyway, bizarre. That was such a bizarre segue. But 6 blocks, oh my goodness. I haven't been in Chicago in quite some time, but some of those blocks can be pretty damn long. And this is not in the heart of the city of Chicago, but just off to the side. And I mean, I guess if you see one city block, you see in the mall, because originally I'm from New York, and those blocks should be very long. Yeah, it just blew my mind away that 6 blocks long for this one person, one individual that hasn't been seen in about, 5 years now, give or take. Not so much in the wrestling ring, but in public, if ever. Of course, he had his UFC run. He had his trial with the WWE doctor, and that's what we really heard or seen of him. Of course, his ongoing activities and work with Marvel Comics. But CM Punk is a big deal. But unfortunately, he, I guess, for lack of a better term, unfortunately, he stuck to his word and was not all in. He was not. He was asked right after his trial ended and won the case, as a matter of fact, and was asked by, who was it? WrestleZone.com. And there was a video camera. He looked dead right in the camera and says, "I'm not. No, I'm not." And it would be nice to maybe see him at least one more time, maybe not in the ring for a match, but the fact that he was invited to an event and give a proper send-off, if you will. But I guess the best we can have is him going on Twitter later on and just thanking the fans for the overwhelming reception, and that he loved everyone, and that he wishes everyone well. But no CM Punk, no Daniel Bryan. Whatchamacallit, why would, this is weird, the computer wants to update itself while I'm doing this. It did it before. It took over half an hour to get back in here. You're not getting me again, PC. No, you're not. Anyway. No Daniel Bryan, as I guess I might have been the only one that could have suggested, or I'm sure there were others, but I just didn't see it or read it anywhere or hear about it. But the ongoing argument, I guess, whether or not Daniel will resign, and he did apparently resign with WWE. It turns out to be a multi-year contract, and many are speculating that, well, I guess Daniel Bryan's going to finish off his career with WWE. And I hope he does. But unfortunately, this prevented him from appearing at All In. Not that it was planned, not that it was rumored, but my belief was, since his original contract was going to expire September 1st, the day of All In, that he would have taken out one day off, and he would be officially not under WWE contract. He would not have signed, and because it expired, I don't think. And again, I'm still trying to figure out the A's and Z's, or this and the P and the T's and the I's, whatever, of the terms when it comes to having your contract expire. That the 90-day clause, no compete clause, doesn't affect you because your contract expired. I know nowadays they built it in there, but because WWE was trying to get him to re-sign a new deal. So in other words, had his original contract expired and had the 90-day clause, he would not have been able to appear All In anyway. But it turns out he signed a deal during the week. And, of course, this is why we're seeing him in a long-length program with The Miz, heading into Hell in a Cell. And Bryan did not appear at All In. It would have been a hell of a shock, especially with a current WWE superstar going against the grain, if you will, and against the system, and say, well, just like Cody Rhodes says, WWE does not own professional wrestling. And Vince would argue, like, well, pal, guess what? We're not professional wrestling. We're sports entertainment. Yeah, call it what you want. He's still wrestling. So if you haven't heard already, that argument that Conrad Thompson had with Bruce Pritchard, it was during the SmackDown, the first ever SmackDown episode. You know, redundant much, redundant much, redundant. It was there something to wrestle with episode of the first ever SmackDown episode. Technically, there's only one, but they're arguing about that there are two first episodes, which doesn't make sense. But whatever. But in the middle there, Conrad literally has an argument with Bruce Pritchard about it's a freaking professional wrestling show. Wrestling, it's in the name of the company, even though they're going by the initials now. Like, no, Conrad, it's sports entertainment. No, I'm not gonna get into it, but my stand, my point of view, my belief is it's professional wrestling, and Cody was assured to put that out there, and it delivered. All In delivered to be a professional wrestling show, which was exactly what it was. And I had to see it again. If I didn't mention it already, I saw it again during the week, and it's unbelievable. There was never a dull moment. There was never a time that was lagging. And, you know, I mentioned a few nitpicks before. I guess you could call it a nitpick, but something to point out that the pay-per-view itself was about 4 hours. Well, it was exactly 4 hours. And compared to, say, a Monday Night Raw that can go over 3 hours sometimes. And what do they do there? They open up the shows with promos, going anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes even half an hour. And then they get into a match. And there goes your first hour, a long-ass promo with half a match before you get into the second hour. And then they repeat it again, only there will be maybe a backstage, or they'll cut to the announcers, and they're just repeating what we just saw, or repeating what we're going to see later, repeating in the sense that it was already announced, and they're shoving it again down our throats. Well, stay tuned, coming up. Like, okay, we know. I mean, is that what's considered entertainment from the sports entertainment portion of your entertainment titled show? That's not really the official company's name. You know, the Sports Entertainment Federation or World Sports Entertainment Event or whatever crap you want to call it. It's boring. All In did not do any of that. Right after the national anthem, the announcers introduced themselves, and they got right into it. So what I'm going to do here is run down the match lineups, give out the results. No, spoiler alert, but no, seriously, it was just an amazing show, and I really hope there will be an All In 2, but now it's 50-50, but probably now it's going to be maybe more about 60-40, maybe 70-30, because many of the talent that appeared here have been either rumored or have an opportunity to sign with WWE in less than a year from now. And we always come along, we always reach this point between Survivor Series and Royal Rumble, I guess, to really narrow it down on the calendar of who's going to show up, who's going to appear at or after WrestleMania. For the past couple of years, it's been Kenny Omega, the main argument or the main debate. What's Omega going to do? And now that Cody Rhodes is a huge hot commodity, maybe WWE will reach out. But here's the problem. And I mentioned this before here on the JM Report, and they've done it to their own talent. Just think of Cody Rhodes and Kenny Omega, for example, or hypothetically speaking, that they've been competing on a separate brand, but has tie-ins with WWE, and all of a sudden they reached out to Rhodes and Omega for a contract or an opportunity to work on the main roster. And what happens? None of their original ideas that Rhodes or Omega would bring in for their characters, for their in-ring work, is all but washed away, toned down to a point where you don't even recognize the same Cody Rhodes or Kenny Omega that you basically fell in love with as a performer in the ring compared to a year or so ago. is completely different. Ironically, or coincidentally, they've been doing that with NXT call-ups the past couple of years, if not further back than that. And it's unfortunate. I can't stress this enough. If an NXT superstar is being asked, hey, pal, you have an opportunity to go up to the main roster, if I'm them, no thank you. No thank you. I am fine where I am. And if the argument also adds on that, like, well, you can't really stay here or something, which I can never see be brought up in an argument or a discussion. You see, the thing is, if we don't promote you or send you up to the main roster, then you're holding back someone else's spot, or you're basically holding this spot hostage, which is bullshit. It really is. Just do what you got to do with the new person, and they've always found ways to segue, maybe not segue, but to insert the performer you're trying to promote in other ways. Okay, well, so the focus won't be on on that performer that you're trying to move up. The focus will be on the new person, but it doesn't mean you can erase the one you're trying to move. I'm not even saying set him aside, him or her. I mean, NXT, we've seen it. It's been clear. NXT has a different set of writers and, creative. And everyone has a significant and relevant piece or part on the show. Okay, 1 week you may not, for a couple of weeks you may not see one specific talent, but they'll come right back and say, oh, there they are. But I digress. So, assuming that this is what's going to happen, if not most, then some of the talent that appeared on All In will be reached out by WWE. And I know it's a big deal. I know it will mean a financial improvement. And at the end of the day, that's what it really comes down to. If you're that much of a hot commodity like Cody Rhodes is now, and for that matter, Kenny Omega, yeah, you bet there's going to be long-going negotiations for a specific contract. Vince might see you, or might see one of them say, I see maybe $750,000 a year. Well, sounds nice, but why not push it for $1 million or 1.1? I mean, that's the whole point of negotiating. I think Cody has proven, for example, that he's worth every single dollar. And just imagine if he was just a promoter and can do this maybe 4 or 5 times a year. Maybe not specific calling All In, but, come up with different title for pay-per-views and whomever is available and whomever is willing to be part of another historic event. But for an All In 2, everyone needs to be committed, and there's always a way to, when it comes to these contract negotiations, to place somewhere in there that, well, when it comes to this, pretty much like the Brock Lesnar negotiations went down. Not that I was there, not that you were there, but considering how things worked out, that he got what he wanted. Somehow Vince accepted and agreed and paid him the ridiculous amount of money that he did. And where is he now? And what's he going to do now? Either way, he's walking around with a big fat wallet. So who's to say that, for example, Cody Rhodes is contacted by Vince or Triple H, whomever, say, hey, we've been watching what you've been doing and I think it's great. I think some of that success could also benefit yourself in WWE if you make that return. If I'm Cody, it's like, okay, all of that sounds good. However, I have my own demands of my own. And if the time should come where an opportunity presents itself where I can do All In 2, whenever the date and the location is chosen, I want that time off and no influence from WWE. I'll reach out to whomever I want to that's available. That's not that's not conflicting a schedule with WWE. And they've done that before. How do you think some of these guys who are still with WWE contracted appear at these other independent pro wrestling shows. That's because usually the answer is because the schedule is not conflicted with something that WWE wants them to do at that time. So they can still do that. That still exists. That part of the deal can exist. And it'll be up to Vince. Ultimately, it'll be up to Vince, maybe even Triple H, the head of talent relations, and decide like, well, this is what Cody wants. Do you agree, or what should I tell him when I get back to him? But definitely, and I know I'm rambling on here, but definitely we should see an All In 2. Hopefully, it'll be bigger, as usually that's how it works. But speaking of, let's just get it right into the 5-hour long, if you include 0 hour event that was All In. SoCal Uncensored tag team of Frankie Kazarian and Scorpio Sky defeated the Briscoe brothers, Jay and Mark, in a non-title tag team match to open up 0 hour. And I'm just going to say right off the bat, as amazing as the show was, the same could be said about these individual matches. I don't want to rank like some people have been doing, which is fine. But to say, oh, this one, outshined the other and this and that, I don't want to do that. I try not to, at least not on my shows. If everyone can agree that it was a good match, it was pretty good, that was a great match, then besides that analogy, then why rank them? The entire show itself was great, and the kickoffs were, well, the 0 hour, because this is their version of a pregame show. And one thing to note that Frankie Kazarian and Scorpio Sky cosplayed as Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed, respectively, and I thought that was cool. The Briscoes were the Briscoes. What can I say? And then we had the over-the-budget Battle Royale to determine the number one contender for the Ring of Honor World Heavyweight Championship later on in the show of All In to face Jay Lethal. Now, this was probably one of the, uncertain amount of participants, or the participants in general, who will appear in this match. First, I heard it was 15, and then it went up to 30 somehow, which I think someone was just exaggerating. Then it was down back to 14, then 12, and but at the end, it was 19 participants. With a few familiar faces such as Billy Gunn and his son, was it Austin? Austin Gunn? His mannerisms were, it was literally like a clone of Billy. His mannerisms and his movements and his gestures, if you will, in the ring. Like, my God, he's just like Billy. Obviously father and son, but still, I mean, it's not always. I mean, when Dustin Rhodes and Dusty Rhodes, God rest his soul, besides the obvious differences, I mean, there weren't that many, but the mannerisms were far apart from each other. But it's just amazing to see that. But 19-man or 19-person Battle Royale as Tommy Dreamer, Bully Ray Dudley, or just Bully Ray showed up during the match, Brian Cage. And at the end, not the end, let's just get to the beginning real quick here. Bully Ray comes down. The match is already begun. And the announcers made it seem as if Bully Ray wasn't a part of this, but he came down anyway. And he's beating down on a masked wrestler ringside. And he throws him through the table, where the timekeepers were, and the ring announcers. And just went about his business, goes in the ring, the match continues, and everyone else is thrown out but Bully Ray, but the bell has not rung yet. And there was some confusion. There's no music playing, there's no announcement made. All of a sudden, the same masked wrestler that Bully Ray beat up appears behind them, removes the mask, and it reveals to be Flip Gordon. The story there was Flip Gordon wasn't advertised or was just told that, well, you're not going to be at All In. We just don't have anything for you. So he found a way, disguising himself, and eliminated Bully Ray and became the number one contender for the Ring of Honor Championship. And the place went nuts. And if you probably can't tell by now, there's going to be a few names here that I'm going to mention, and unfortunately, but respectively, I don't know too much of them. I'm not going to pretend that I do. But the fact that the all-in concept, when it came together, was more than enough to get me invested and interested. And I hope everyone, men and women who are part of this all-in card, make it as high as possible to the top of the mountain of professional wrestling. I really do. So the all-in pay-per-view itself began with Matt Cross defeating Maxwell Jacob Friedman. Great opener. And my understanding was Matt Cross, against someone else that legit was not advertised to be there, or wasn't even expected to, but he was there and defeated Maxwell. Then we saw Christopher Daniels take on Stephen Amell. And I believe this was Stephen Amell's third official professional wrestling match. I did not see his second one. His first one was, of course, back at SummerSlam in a tag match with Neville. And was very successful there. And I got to say, for his third or maybe in his fourth match, Stephen Amell looked amazing. And you can tell he's a huge professional wrestling fan, obviously. He's not looked at or treated as other celebrities that stepped into the ring who had little to no athletic skills at all. I don't know too much of Amell's background as far as athletics go, but he put the time in to get the work done, to train properly, to have all these high spots. Hell, he threw himself through a table at one point, jumping off the apron, trying to crash through Christopher Daniels laid out on the table. Daniels will move out of the way, and Amell will crash and burn on the floor. Not too many celebrities or actors, if you will do something like this and then go back to his other job where he can go acting and still be physical as there as well. I haven't seen all the episodes of Arrow or the upcoming crossover with these DC comic TV shows this fall, but much praise and respect goes out to Stephen Amell. And there are only, I guess, a handful of times that we can see him again in the ring, and he's delivered each time. He really has. I hope he might consider this. Maybe not. I mean, he's been with a one-off with WWE, but I really doubt they're going to take him seriously like that. And there's just going to be too much, backstage hollering about, well, he never paid his dues. Why is he here and stuff like that, which I get that. I do understand that. I do respect that. But times have changed. And you can't see Amell say like a Dennis Rodman or a Jay Leno, God forbid. But he took it all seriously, and it showed. He had like nearly a 25-minute match with Christopher Daniels, and Daniels is one of the veterans and one of the best out there right now. Who better to be in the ring with? But at the end, Daniels was victorious over Amell, and they shook hands and embraced a little bit in the ring. Great match. Then we had what they call a four-corner survival match between Tessa Blanchard, Chelsea Green, Madison Rayne, and Britt Baker. It was touching to point out here, and and of course some took to social media like, well, I guess we know who's going to win, because during the entrance for Tessa Blanchard, the entranceway was more of a ramp, and then halfway through it was like little stairways going down, and then you're on the arena floor and you continue walking towards the ring. So at the bottom of the stairs was Tully Blanchard, the father, and Magnum T.A., the stepfather of Tessa Blanchard. Magnum T.A., I didn't recognize. It took me a while. I mean, I haven't seen him in years. I meant to see him maybe a couple of years ago in New York, but it just never came across. But it's interesting, to say the least, to have two historic figures from professional wrestling, Tully Blanchard and Magnum T.A., who had a blood feud this one time. I believe it was during Starrcade, 87 or 88? They had this epic steel cage match for the television championship. and it was a bloodbath to say the least. And little did I know, fast forward a few years, that Magnum TA would be even part somehow with the Blanchard family, and that he's the stepfather of Tessa Blanchard. It was just mind blowing, and the announcers pointed that out, and I was never aware of that detail. It's funny how you learn things after the fact, but still, it's just amazing. And these women threw everything, gave it their all. It was the only women's match of the card. And at the end, saw Tessa Blanchard victorious over Britt Baker, Madison Rayne, and Chelsea Green. Great, amazing match. And then we get into, I was surprised by the lineup of the rundown, by the way. The fourth match in, for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, Cody Rhodes, or just Cody, taking on Nick Aldis. They had this real feel fight. How's it go? Like a real fight feel. Like Cole tries to run off on Raw and SmackDown. It doesn't. Not even close what they did. What they did here with All In production-wise, they made it legit look like a big deal, like a real serious, big-time fight. Almost like what they do with UFC, and I know many compared it to that. You see them one by one walking backstage, heading towards the ring with an entourage. And Cody, not only with Brandy, his wife, he was also accompanied to the ring by Diamond Dallas Page, Tommy Dreamer, and Glacier. Long time no see. And of course, Cody had his dog. What's his name? Pharaoh? Was it Pharaoh? This dog got a standing ovation. It's not even funny that the crowd popped when his dog appeared on screen, and then finally out in the arena, and he walked him all the way to the ring. And Cody was all in serious mode. He was in I'm kick your ass mode. And a similar setup with Nick Aldis. As you see him backstage heading towards the ring, and he's accompanied by Samuel Shaw, Sean Devary, Tim Storm, and Jeff Jarrett, former NWA champion himself. And again, you see Aldis with his robe on. You see him wearing the championship belt on the outside. It was a real big deal. Like that, this is gonna be a fight. Wasn't wasn't like a Rocky Balboa fight or what was that MMA fight between one of the old rivalries between Ortiz and Liddell? Wasn't like that. It was a wrestling match, but still, it gave such a big fight deal that you were curious to see what was going to happen, and it delivered. Maybe a couple of minutes in, there was a spot where Cody jumps off down to the arena floor where Aldis was, and Aldis counters with an elbow or forearm to the face. And there was a bit of confusion there because Earl Hebner was the referee, and he was starting to count, but then all of a sudden he steps out and goes back into the ring to continue to count. And then all of a sudden you see DDP run down. And then a moment later you see Sean Devary come down. So it was about it was confusing. It's confusing trying to describe too because, it wasn't sure what was happening, even looking back at it. What was going on? So finally, even though the referee put up the X sign, which was like, what? Are you serious? He's legit hurt? But there was no bell ring. The ring announcer didn't say anything. Even the commentators were confused. So the belief is, and this was never confirmed, and I doubt it ever will. It could be wrong. But the belief is because we would see the result that Cody was busted open. So the belief that Cody forgot to bring the blade with him to, cut himself open. So when DDP came down as an audible, DDP did it himself. He would blade Cody to continue the match. Now he wasn't bleeding buckets of blood, but it was enough to give them more realism and legitimacy to the match. And to stall for time, DDP gets into the ring, and Sean Devary is trying to, hey, what are you doing here? Get out of here. What heels usually do. And DDP gets the diamond cutter in and gets a huge pop. And then finally, Cody gets back into the ring and the match continues. So at the end, we see, and thankfully I wasn't the only one to point out the comparison, they did the SummerSlam 92 ending with Bret Hart and the British Bulldog for the Intercontinental title. All this was trying to go for a sunset flip, only for Cody to counter, grab his heels, and place his shoulders onto the ground, onto the ring mat, and gets a 3 count. And Cody Rhodes becomes the new NWA World Heavyweight Champion, becoming the first ever father and son to hold that championship, to hold that prestige and honor. And the concern was there that Cody, to accept the scheduling that's coming up as an NWA champion, because that tradition's never changed, where the NWA champion will literally travel throughout the country almost every day, and at times even around the world. Before then, Cody Rhodes' schedule was just Raw, Ring of Honor here, and New Japan there, so he'll travel back and forth, but not to the extent of an NWA schedule. And I hope, if it hasn't already, I hope this really brings back the NWA, where traditional and true pro wrestling is from. Being from the Northeast, there wasn't too much exposure of that. It was just World Wrestling Federation. And maybe, and I stress that, maybe some AWA. And that only came because of ESPN. Before there was a Sports Center, ESPN just had all these random sporting events throughout the world, having probably one of the first 24/7 sports channels. And along the way, Vern Gagne got into it with the AWA on ESPN. And that was another part of exposure to pro wrestling. But of course, you need to have cable for that, and not everyone had cable. All of this came later after the fact. But I really hope this has legitimized NWA and its championship and its prestigious, because before everyone else, WWE, WCW, ECW, there was the NWA. And it's still in existence for those who didn't know. In a Chicago street fight, Hangman Page defeated Joey Janela. The story here is Hangman apparently killed, quote unquote, or murdered, quote unquote, Joey Ryan leading up to the All In event in a hotel room. And oh my goodness. So throughout the night there was not throughout the night, what I was saying. During the match, Hangman will become distracted, as some of the fans will point out Joey Ryan. They will chant his name a little bit, but there were a couple of really cringing spots. Hangman did like a Death Valley driver onto a ladder that was laid out between the ring apron and the guardrail. It was just really, really hard to watch. But at the end, Hangman Page was victorious. And then all of a sudden, the lights go out. And you look up on the Titantron, and you see what was described as the remains or the corpse of Joey Ryan, laying on the same bed he died on, apparently. And all of a sudden, do I really have to describe this? All of a sudden, Joey Ryan starts to get an erection. Because the cameraman happened to be right underneath Joey's crotch area. And the foreground is the crotch, and you see Joey laying on the bed, on a pillow, or whatever. And you see, he gets a full-blown erection, no pun intended. And then you see the march of the penises. The cult of cocks, if you will. Oh, my God. There were at least about half a dozen, if not a dozen, or whatever it was, full-grown men dressed in these penis costumes, They marched to the ring. They were like penis druids or something. They just stand in the aisleway. Hangman's freaking out, and all of a sudden, Joey Ryan's music plays, and then he comes out to the ring dancing, lollipopping. Oh, he's alive! He's alive! He never died. And just beats down on Hangman, and the druid penises carry him out. Oh my God. If there is a nitpick here, I think this took a little longer, no pun intended, than it should have been, considering that they barely got the show in to begin with. And well, I'll get to that as the main event concluded. But yeah, this was probably one of the highlights of the event. And not everyone got it. Not everyone was, I guess, chuckled by it. I mean, looking back now, yeah. But when it first happened, I was like, why? So, I mean, it was so bad. It was funny. It was one of those reactions for me. But unbelievable. Can we move on? Let's move on. Next up, we had the Ring of Honor World Championship match as Flip Gordon, as I mentioned earlier, won the Over the Budget Battle Royal to earn the right for a title shot here. And even before the champion would come out, you see Jay Lethal in the backstage area. And there was someone off camera trying to get his attention. And Lethal wasn't having any of it. He was just trying to move on. And all of a sudden, this person holds out a pair of sunglasses. And at first, like literally the first second or two, I didn't know, like, well, what's that about? And then by the third second, I'm like, oh, wow. Is he really going to do this? And then he gets tagged on the shoulder. And all of a sudden, he goes from Jay Lethal into Black Machismo. And sure enough, that had to have been pre-taped, or Jay Lethal is the quickest dresser I've ever seen, or that I know of. And Pop and Circumstance starts playing the original Macho Man Randy Savage theme song. And here comes Jay Lethal as Black Machismo, dressed up in of course, it wasn't the actual ring attire, but it was one of Macho Man's ring attires in his WCW days when they were doing the Mega Powers there, the old yellow and red and black. So they had to make up a new outfit similar for Jay Lethal size. And he was accompanied by the genius himself, Lanny Poffo. And he came out to a standing ovation. And he got all the Macho Man's mannerisms down again. Really good impersonation. And I'm going to point out that at this point, Flip Gordon was a part of the Bullet Club. Came out with Brandy Rhodes. And again, callbacks and nostalgia, call it what you will. Just as the match began, Lethal, or Machismo, looks down and sees Brandy and tells her to get to the other side of the ring in this corner. So he jumps out of the ring and grabs Brandy by the arm, not abusively, but, just to escort her to the other side of the ring. And Brandy is forcibly trying to restrain him. And he was trying to prevent him from pulling her to the other side of the ring. And the whole time she's yelling, "I'm not Elizabeth. I am not Elizabeth." And they try to do that again, only this time Brandy will get into the ring. And Lethal's behind her following. It's like, what are you doing? And Brandy, again, to the top of her tongue, screams, "I'm not Elizabeth," smacks him. So Black Machismo goes back into Jay Lethal because I literally snapped out of it. He's looking around, looking all confused. I'm like, oh, yeah, I got a match to do. And then Lanny Poffo jumps on the ring, the ring apron on the other side, and tries to convince Lethal that, hey, you're the Macho Man, you're Black Machismo, and then tags him back on the chest, and then changes him back into Black Machismo, and the match continues. There was so much callback here during this match. Of course, that pulling Elizabeth from one side to the other. There was a callback to WrestleMania 3, where Randy Savage was not allowing George Steele to get too close to Elizabeth during his match with Ricky Steamboat. There was the WrestleMania 7 callback Instead of 5, there were 3 flying elbows off the top rope, and Flip Gordon still kicked out. But eventually, Jay Lethal would retain his Ring of Honor championship in a hell of a match with Flip Gordon. And shout outs to Flip Gordon for representing G.I. Joe here for his ring attire. And it was just amazing. Again, a real amazing match. Kenny Omega took on Penta El Zero, or Pentagon Jr., or Pentagon Dark. It's Pentagon. So, in a essentially champion versus champion match, you got Kenny Omega, the New Japan champion, the IWGP heavyweight champion, taking on the Lucha Underground champion. Even though I just don't understand why Lucha Underground wasn't mentioned, if ever, during the event. Everyone else was mentioned as their representative and individual championships. Even the name graphs or the name tags, when they appeared on screen, mentioned what champions they are and from where. Lucha Underground, nothing. Absolutely nothing. I still don't get that. But anyway, my understanding, this was the first time ever meeting between the two. And I don't think there was much of a communication barrier here, as Pentagon does have he speaks some English. But whatever they were able to put together backstage or leading up to this match, it was worth it. Oh my God. If I were to say there was a match of the night, it would be this one, but I don't rank them like that. But this one's up there. So at the end of the match, we see Kenny Omega go over. He defeats Pentagon El Zero. All of a sudden, the lights go out. And I think it took longer than expected to come back, because you hear some commotion. You will normally see some flash bulbs go off, but I think the camera intentionally did not want to show any illuminations, if you will, of the ring, in case there were so many flash bulbs in the background. But all of a sudden, you see the lights come back up. And, okay, nothing out of the ordinary. You see Kenny Omega still standing by the ropes. You see Pentagon laid out in the background near the apron. So, okay, so they're trying to play it off as a power surge or something like that. Then all of a sudden, Kenny Omega begins to celebrate. But you see Pentagon getting up. Like, what? What's going on here? And he just starts to beat the crap out of Kenny Omega. And then he pulls out a code breaker. Like, wait, is it? But right away, you have to notice, because the tattoos and the size difference, because there was a difference in bulk, if you will, between the original Pentagon and this individual that turned out to be Chris Jericho, under the mask, full Pentagon attire and all. I mean, with the exception of the arms that were exposed and, of course, the tattoos, you probably would have gotten it right away. I'm sure the fans in the arena who were in the higher up sections probably didn't get it right away. But once they did the code breaker, it has to be. And originally, Chris Jericho wasn't able to make it because he had a Fozzy concert to attend to in Kansas the same night. So it was worked out where a private jet was sent out to drop off Jericho in Chicago, do his bit here with Kenny Omega, and tell Omega that he will see him on the Jericho Cruise. So that would be their next match. And by the way, Chris Jericho is the Intercontinental Champion from New Japan. So he just laid out their World Heavyweight Champion here and All In. So there'll probably be another champion versus champion. I don't know if it's going to be for the title match, but the feud continues between Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho, and more than likely conclude on the Jericho Cruise, even though it will not be televised. But I'm sure there'll be a few slick fans that are going to stream it somehow, somewhere on social media, but we'll find out. But that was one of the surprise cameos of All In, Chris Jericho, and with makeup and all, the Pentagon makeup, he performed at the Fozzy concert as half Jericho, half Pentagon. Y20, I guess, I don't know, but it was just an amazing story there. And Okada will take on Marty Scurll. And And a pretty decent match. I say decent because I guess they were feeling the effects there, like, oh my goodness, we might be running out of time here. So not sure what the full rundown would have been for Okada and Scroll match. But again, they delivered. They had a tremendous match. And this led into the main event of the Golden Elite. Matt and Nick Jackson, the Young Bucks, teaming up with Kota Ibushi, and they wrestled Rey Mysterio, Rey Fenix, and Bandido. I'm not too familiar with Bandido, but Phoenix I've seen plenty of times on Lucha Underground, and of course Rey Mysterio. There's no surprise and no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's Rey Mysterio Jr. So this was a 6-man tag team match. They barely got this match in. There was about maybe 11 minutes left to the top of the hour, and I wasn't even thinking that. I thought, I'm like, oh, well, they're giving everyone else extra time to go over, but the writing was on the wall as far as well, can they afford that extra hour? Even if they did, they probably didn't want to take that chance. So who was it? I think was it Nick earlier today or yesterday? He tweeted a photo that someone from the audience took, and you see Nick whispering into Matt's ear during the match outside the ring. And it was there that he revealed on Twitter that, yeah, this is me telling my brother that we have less than 2 minutes to go home because they're going to cut the feed for the pay-per-view. So they improvised on the spot. And if it seemed rushed, that is the reason why. It legitimately was rushed towards the end there. And the Golden Elite would defeat, I just rhymed there, Mysterio, Phoenix, and Bandido at the end of the match for the main event. And they barely got enough time to see them celebrate in the ring. Arms raised up in the air, people hugging each other. And they says about 3 seconds, but again, it might be off. But anyway, 3 seconds later, and they cut off. The pay-per-view feed was cut off. Similar to the claims of the first ever, what was it, barely legal ECW pay-per-view. And it was just cut off at the end there, out of nowhere. But the celebration continued as some people jumped on Facebook Live, for example, or Instagram, and they continued celebrating. Everyone was congratulating each other. Everyone saying thank you for everyone for coming out. Rey Mysterio got on the microphone and thanked the Young Bucks and Cody Rhodes for allowing him to be a part of history and for thinking of him to be asked to come down. And okay, almost lost my mic there. And one cool thing about Rey Mysterio, he came out with his Wolverine attire. He pulled it off well. Really pulled it off. Then again, I don't see Wolverine pulling off a few Hurricanranas. That's, I think, Black Widow's department. But anyway, great to see Rey Mysterio still has it. He still got it, if you will. And it's all up to WWE now, according to Rey Mysterio, as far as what's going on with his contract status. Well, according to Mysterio, as he appeared on the Jim Ross special StarCast edition of Ringside with Jim Ross, Mysterio says, I'm waiting for them, WWE, to say now and the time is right. Then let's go. It's kind of weird. I mean, obviously Mysterio was advertised for this event. Obviously, WWE knew about this. So it wasn't as if as soon as you're done with them, you come work for us and we'll expect you to be on Raw. That didn't happen. Or if he was going to SmackDown, again, that didn't happen. But the visual itself, like, wait, Mysterio just competed at All In and now he's here with WWE. Probably because they wanted to avoid the fans talking about that, much less, well, you have no choice to bring it up. Oh, Mysterio was involved in a pay-per-view this past weekend or something or another. Yeah, WWE, Vince McMahon just being bitter about that. Well, they would have been bitter. And to acknowledge someone else like that, I mean, they have been here and there, but long-term, just to freely acknowledge others out there in the pro wrestling business, I mean, it's not taboo anymore. I mean, that's pretty much insulting the fans' intelligence at that point. But then again, what else is new? So that's Rey Mysterio's status. I did have something about Daniel Bryan, if I can find it here. Yeah. According to Pro Wrestling Sheets, Daniel Bryan has signed a new contract with the WWE, and it's believed that the future of Bryan, the deal is believed to be a multi-year deal contract, which could mean that Bryan will spend the last few years of his in-ring career with the company, which I mentioned earlier. And yeah, it does make sense here. It would make sense. I mean, he's another hot commodity. Why would Vince let him go? Then again, so was Bret back in '97. Look what happened. But the leader of the Yes Movement's future in the business has been up in the air for over a year now. But if the report is to believe, then he'll be sticking around for a while longer. So, in other words, confirmed but not confirmed. But it's past September 1st now, and obviously some deal was made. No detail. Well, the full details hasn't been revealed yet, and if they ever will be, I'll be sure to bring them to you. I mentioned Lenny Poffo earlier. He debuted a new podcast, The Genius Cast, this past Monday, and apparently, I haven't heard it yet, but the promotion leading up to this is that he will answer questions from his resentfulness towards Jerry Lawler and Pat Patterson, why he inducted Randy Savage into the Hall of Fame back in 2015 against his brother's wishes, and whether or not the urban legend about Randy and the young Stephanie McMahon is true, and much more. You can hear for yourselves through iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and many other outlets of podcasting. He kind of answered that question as far as the young Stephanie McMahon rumor on a shoot interview, and they kind of danced around it. I know in the one of the last releases of WWE videos about Randy Savage, they also danced around it, and it was never a simple yes or no answer. And even if it's a yes, I mean, do you really want to put it out there like that? I mean, what kind of picture would that paint about Randy Savage way after the fact? And if I remember right, Lanny pretty much said like, well, the only people that would know is obviously Randy and Stephanie, but never answered. That's as far as I've gotten. So for this purpose alone, and this will be my last attempt to find out, I'm sure as many of you are as well, but if it's the same wishy-washy response, then I'm not going to bother. So I'll look for the transcripts themselves first before I actually listen in, and to hear the tone that he says it into. But yeah, the Genius now joins the many list of who's wrestlers that have their own podcast. Season 2 of the Mixed Match Challenge is returning on September 18th, and the teams have been announced already between Raw and SmackDown. So on Team Raw, you're going to have Braun Strowman and Alexa Bliss teaming up again, and new faces such as Bobby Lashley teaming up with Sasha Banks, Finn Balor and Bayley, Jinder Mahal with Alicia Fox, and Kevin Owens with Natalya. Over on SmackDown, you're going to have the reigning Mixed Match Challenge champions, if you will. The Miz and Asuka will team up again. Also, Jimmy Uso and Naomi. Also, Rusev and Lana. But a couple of changes will be AJ Styles, the WWE champion, teaming up with the women's champion, Charlotte Flair, and R-Truth and Carmella. The brackets have yet to be determined. Also, just like the original, and I don't think it was mentioned this time around, but the original Mixed Match Challenge was about a charity organization and that all proceeds will go to that said charity. This time around, it wasn't mentioned. I have no idea why. Maybe it was meant to be that way, or it was just now something else to do during the year for WWE to be that much more relevant. Gail Kim had not too kind words about Stephanie McMahon. And you know what? She has every right to. Because there are people out there that have these interviews or shoot interviews, if you will, or promos, and they say a lot of things that many others are thinking about. Now, I don't know the full story other than before this was said, during her last run with WWE, Gail Kim was just unhappy with how things were going and how the women were being treated then at that time. So Gail Kim said that she felt the need to whitewash herself because she didn't feel that WWE saw her as an Asian person of color image marketable. So in other words, during her last run, WWE creative, or in this case Stephanie, didn't think that Asian personalities or Asian wrestlers can be marketable. And I think that's just completely ridiculous, completely ludicrous. What they were smoking, I have no idea. But whatever it is was blowing out of their asses. So Gail described even going as far as to dye her hair blonde. And she didn't know how to get management to try to give her more opportunities. And people wondered why she was upset and wasn't feeling it during her last run. So Gail Kim also said that that she tried to be the blonde, thinking that maybe it was going to work for her. Obviously, it didn't. Thankfully, we never get to see her in blonde hair in WWE. But also said that Stephanie McMahon and the current role that she's portraying as the head of the Women's Evolution is a facade, because if she really cared, she would have helped out Gail Kim during her time. And I think that's fair to say. I mean, I wasn't the fly on the wall here, but there's no denying how the difference between the women's division during Gail Kim's second run with WWE, which probably was in the late 2000s, was it 2010, around that area? But point being that it wasn't how it is now, how it was back then. Definitely not. It was clearly different, where they'll have less than 1 minute matches, little to no build up. The titles were all but jokes. The Divas titles, well, there was one Divas championship. And even then, when it was first announced, like, Divas, I mean, do you know what the definition of diva is? And you want to have these women represent as that, divas? Well, they still have a show called Total Divas, so no one bothered to change that name. So, yeah, Gail Kim, she's one of the best, and just follow her in her TNA career. And the first one that she had, like her first night was a battle royal for the women's championship, and she wins. So there was some confidence there that she can carry the brand. And she was a new face to the company, built out of Korea, I believe, even though she was raised in Canada. But it's just too bad that things are the way they are, where the women's division has moved forward and that Gail Kim is not a part of it. And she has her reasons not to be. She has her, and she has every right to feel and think the way she does. And had things changed, or maybe had things changed to a point where they could reach out to Gail Kim to be a part of Evolution Now, that's coming up in October. But it's very difficult to change. It's very, my microphone. It's very difficult to change someone's mind, is what I'm trying to say. And, I completely understand where Gail Kim is coming from. Okay, I just switched out microphone plugins or adapters here. Let's see if this works. So PW Insider reported that Joey Mercury, the former WWE Tag Team Champion and Ring of Honor producer, was arrested last Saturday morning. And Mercury was in town to work as a producer on the All In show. So according to the police department that told PW Insider, just outside the Marriott, the police found Mercury sleeping in his car, and after approaching him and running his personal information, they found out that he had an outstanding warrant from Orange County, Florida. And Mercury was taken into custody and was being held on $2,500 bail at the Cook County Department of Corrections. You see, these are reasons why I would pay, say, a traffic violation ticket as soon as possible. And I know just by saying it, many are not going to believe, but you know what? I'm a good person. I'm a good boy, if you will. And many don't know that I used to be a peace officer out of New York City. So whether it's that mentality or that way of thinking or the training I went through for that, it kind of opened my eyes a little bit, and not many think of it too much, or like, it's cool to be a renegade or a rebel. It works for some people, but I wouldn't recommend sitting on something like this, even as small or irrelevant as a speeding ticket or any kind of traffic violation from a different state, nonetheless. And now there's a warrant for your arrest for not responding on time or appearing in court or whatever the issue was. Yeah, that's going to stick with you. That's going to be on your record. But how many times have we heard stories of a wrestler being arrested for whatever reason, and they're still working, they're still employed, they're still getting income? It's funny how the world, at least in that little universe, works for everyone like that. But kudos, I guess. Big Cass was on Booker T's Heated Conversation podcast this week and opened up regarding his firing from WWE. And he was very open and candid about this. And he goes on to say, if I'm going to be honest with you, Booker, I made a lot of mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes in a short period of time. I did some things that I shouldn't have done. I guess the company could not rely on me and could not trust me. Look, I'll just be honest with you. In my opinion, they made the right decision for them. It was the right decision to get rid of me. And at that point in time, not to say I would not be back, but at that point in time, they definitely made the right decision for them. And wow, I mean, he goes on to say, everyone makes mistakes, but when you make that many mistakes in that short amount of time, you lose people's trust and you are not reliable anymore. So basically he's saying he's taking responsibility for what happened there. He did point out about the going into business for himself, dealing with the little person that was personating Daniel Bryan in the ring. And he was just told to just knock him down. That's it. But Big Cass dropped an elbow, and then he kicked him a few times, and like, what are you doing? And that was the last straw. Which had great potential. I mean, there aren't too many 7-footers with his frame, like you see Big Show and you see Kevin Nash. Those are real bulked up guys, real bulked up dudes. Not that Big Cass isn't, but between the ones I mentioned, Big Cass seemed to be more athletic, if you will. I mean, he did stuff off the second and top rope a couple of times during his matches. But his one advantage is that he's younger than Big Show and Kevin Nash. So I hope cooler heads prevail, and maybe Cass can come back later on, hopefully a little bit more mature than he left, and work things out. Between now and whenever that happens, Cass is expecting to have a few appearances with Enzo or the real one in upcoming independent shows and meet and greets. I believe he was just added to the big event that's going to take place in New York City on November 10th. Yeah, at the LaGuardia Marriott. And Big Cass was announced as one of the guests, so I will be there. Deadline has revealed that Batista has signed with one of, if not the biggest talent agencies in the world, Creative Arts Agency, or CAA for short. And CAA has an extensive list of top-level actors that include George Clooney, Sandra Bullock, Will Smith, Brad Pitt, Robert De Niro, Robert Downey Jr., Tom Hanks, and many more. So, to a degree, Batista's made it. He's made it to one of these top agencies that recognize his work as an actor, and I really hope this. Well, there was a time when Batista was actually considering leaving acting, and this was around the time he finished the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and was contemplating, maybe this is not working out for me. But after the MCU and the success of Infinity Wars and beyond, And he will appear in the next Avengers movie. He put that out there despite the ending of Infinity War. But yeah, that alone should hopefully give him enough confidence to want to reconsider and stick around a little longer. And he's promoting out there a new movie now with Pierce Brosnan out in the European territories, and it looks good. I mean, it's kind of similar to what Jean-Claude Van Damme did in Sudden Death, I believe. Let me see if I can pull up the name of that movie now because I cannot remember the name of the movie. But it does have Pierce Brosnan in it, and it's what's it called? And the setting, the setting is in a soccer field, and Final Score. Yeah, Final Score with Pierce Brosnan, and he's dealing with hostages. He's dealing with terrorists, and he has to run these obstacle course for the terrorists to have him take care of. And if he doesn't want to see 40,000 people in that arena watching a soccer game not to die, then Batista would have to give in and do whatever they tell him. So it's one of those. At least the trailer was one of those edge of your seats thrillers, and I'm definitely gonna check it out when it comes to theaters. But kudos and congratulations to Dave Batista for joining the CAA. Got a few more notes here before I wrap it up and acknowledge some sad news toward the end, but we'll get there. RingsideNews.com has reported that WWE's first ever female exclusive pay-per-view is in a little bit of trouble. The scheduled Evolution pay-per-view to take place on October 28th at the it's the Nassau Coliseum. But, of course, the official name of it is the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum. It's having a tough time selling tickets despite the constant promotion it receives since it was announced back in July. Also, according to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, the show is still on pace to sell out, but with tickets already being on sale for over a week and a normal pace of the New York wrestling market, this has come as a surprise to the WWE, especially considering that the recent success of All In and the upcoming New Japan Pro Wrestling Ring of Honor Madison Square Garden show selling out immediately without a single match announced. Yeah, the word is getting out there. Dave Meltzer commented on a recent episode of the Wrestling Observer Radio and admitted that he was just as surprised as how slow tickets were moving. Are we really? Then again, this goes back to the argument of, and no disrespect, because I've been out there for several SmackDown tapings and even a couple of Raw shows for Nassau Coliseum. But sometimes it does come down to where you want to do a first ever anything. The city, the state, the arena. Nassau Coliseum, though part of New York State, it's still not Madison Square Garden. It's still not the Barclays Center, where you know the audience will be more vocal than anything else. I don't know. Maybe someone made a mistake on that, or the timing isn't just right. Hell, the announcement of the Evolution pay-per-view itself was a big deal, even though they're still saying it the first ever, anywhere, anytime, which is complete bullshit. This is WWE's first ever all-women's pay-per-view. So maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe who knows? But it's interesting to point out the fact that, All In did it within a year. Here we are about a year coming up with the, or maybe inside of a year, with the New Japan and Ring of Honor show at Madison Square Garden during WrestleMania weekend. That sold out, and not one match was announced. All we have here is confirmed this week, Lita taking on Mickie James, and Trish Stratus taking on Alexa Bliss. That's it. So nostalgia, I guess, is not the way to go with WWE. Sure, they mentioned current WWE main roster talent and NXT talent will be a part of it, but who exactly, we don't know. all the women's championships, all 3-4 of them will be on the line. But maybe the way to go is not just with what they have, but kind of do what All In did, which I'm sure now, if they haven't already, are really hitting creative with this and say, hey, look at what they did and see what you can do to translate or transfer some of that success to us as far as this evolution goes. Because if this fails, there isn't going to be a evolution 2. I can guarantee you that. There'll be no point to it. Okay, you did it once. It's a one-off. You can brag about it, but to go back to it with the lack of success as it stands right now, and especially with little to no tickets being sold, it's not looking good for them. It really isn't. And this is the fact that comes after Naomi challenged Melina. In a sense, she was asked during the Teen Choice Awards if there was one match you would love to have, who would it be against? And she said, without hesitation, Melina. And Melina responded via Twitter, saying, I know in my heart having a match with you would be insanely magical. I absolutely adore you. Thank you for being such an incredible person. Sending you all my love, and please know I am so proud of you. That was from Melina to Naomi. I guess it will be the battle of the splits in the ring. But still, it's just something about WWE that, I guess to a large extent the fans are getting tired of. And this is not even close with the argument about, Roman Reigns or John Cena, guys like that are being shoved down our throats. I think this is speaking volumes that you can do whatever, first time evers, but it won't be as successful anymore because you've done too many of them. You've done, in the span of 2 years or so, if not even less, first time ever women's this, first time ever women's that, which is great. And then after that, what do you got left? What is left to advertise or want to bring back the fans to say, hey, this is a big deal because the women are involved? Okay. You did the first ever Hell in a Cell. You did the first ever Royal Rumble. Did the first ever pretty much everything other than Elimination Chamber. And now you have an all women's pay-per-view. That's your version of a first ever all women's pay-per-view. It's unfortunate because if there was one event I would love to have seen be successful, would be this. And I want to believe the emotion that was shown during the announcement that Triple H nearly broke down in the ring, telling all the women on stage how proud he was of all of them. And through hard work and dedication, big things can come, and they happen, even when you least expect it. So even when months in advance this event is made and ticket sales are not going so well, and now there are memes online and there are jokes online that eventually the remaining tickets will be given out for free, kind of like Eric Bischoff did for a lot of many Nitro episodes. I hope not. There'll be so much money lost there, it's not even going to be funny. But hopefully there'll be a tide-changing occurrence that would have more interest for Evolution coming up in October. Well, wouldn't be much of us. Well, I'm more of a pro wrestling podcasting show here, but it would be I guess I don't know what the word is here, but the fact not to mention what took place this week in new advertisements for Nike, as former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick, and I'm pretty sure I mispronounced his name and I apologize, is now featured in the Nike's 30th anniversary campaign. And there are people, some, many, a lot, a few, but there are people that are very upset about that and have begun burning merchandise of the brand. However, and ties in with the pro wrestling podcast that I have, Titus O'Neil wants to turn a negative into a positive by having the people donate their gear rather than destroy it. And you can do so if you're legitimate, and this is serious. If you want to donate all your Nike gear that you do not want anymore because of this controversial move by Nike, to have Colin Kaepernick part of their campaign now because of what he does that he believes is the right thing to do in his heart and his mind when it comes to kneeling during the national anthem under protest because of police brutalities against minorities. Again, that is his beliefs. That is how he feels. And that's what he wants to do because freedom of speech. But not to turn this show into a political show, but this goes out to those who are upset about that decision by Nike. Rather than destroy your gear, then just send it out and have it be distributed to those in need. And Titus O'Neil is leading that charge. You can send your gear to 2101 North Florida Avenue, Tampa, Florida 33602. And you will be acknowledged by Titus O'Neil himself as a show of gratitude. And I mean, I've seen and heard different situations that people would destroy something of value. Hell, there was one time, oh man, I believe it wasn't for the same reason. But anyway, there was one guy who literally destroyed his entire season ticket booklet under protest because of what was going on with the NFL at the time. And I guess, hey, if you got the money to destroy what you just paid for and do it again, then by all means. But instead of just giving it to someone else or donate it or sell it, whatever. Just if you don't want to be part of it, I get protesting. Hell, I protested for much smaller things, and you know, it may not be relevant to compare it to the stories I'm sharing here. But when the last Transformers movie came out and Michael Bay was talking out of his ass, like, well, they can hate all they want, they're still going to see it. Oh, really? You know what? Here's about $12, $15, $40 or whatever movie tickets are nowadays that you're not going to get, at least not from me. And I will not watch a movie because they suck. But let's not get into another movie review or another political statements. But that's what's going on in the world, unfortunately. And it's going to be an ongoing debate. But you know what? Money talks. And if Nike's intent was to be the number one trend in the world or get to be the talk of the town, then you know what? They were successful. I don't know how they feel about people burning their merchandise, but as of right now, they're still talking about it, and it's going viral. I'm going to close the show here on a sad note, unfortunately. And I didn't know until late yesterday because it was my mother's birthday. And I guess caught up in all the celebration. It wasn't until World News Tonight aired on television and they broke the news, at least to me anyway, but it was already hours after the fact. Burt Reynolds passed away at the age of 62. And Burt's tie-in with pro wrestling, that he was a guest ring announcer during WrestleMania 10 and later celebrated with Bret Hart in the ring after winning the WWF Championship from Yokozuna. And, of course, remembering this, WWE themselves have issued a statement, and it goes, WWE is saddened. Try that again. WWE is saddened to learn that Academy Award-nominated actor and Hollywood icon Burt Reynolds has passed away at the age of 82. The star of more than 50 feature films, including The Longest Yard, Smokey and the Bandit, The Cannonball Run, and Boogie Nights, for which he received an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Reynolds was a special guest celebrity at WrestleMania 10, serving as a ring announcer for the main event of WWE Championship match between Bret Hart and Yokozuna. WWE extends its condolences to the Reynolds family, friends, and fans. It's good to know that even from WWE, there's some humanity left in them to acknowledge something like this. And who knows if Reynolds would have been even considered for a Hall of Fame spot in their celebrity wing. Excuse me. And it's really sad on my part because, it's sad all the way around. It's unfortunate. I thought Burt was a great actor. I thought, despite his downtime that he had a lot of during the 80s and 90s, bit, well, well, you just don't go around smacking reporters in the face on camera. That's, what he did one time. Unfortunately, he had a bad breakup with Lonnie Anderson. And yeah, it wasn't until after Boogie Nights and even the remake of with the Longest Yard, ironically having former and current WWE superstars, Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Great Khali, Goldberg, Kevin Nash. And it seemed like towards that part of his career had some kind of tie-ins with if not pro wrestling itself, then professional sports altogether. And Burt Reynolds was on the Conan O'Brien show just a few months ago. I say in the beginning of the summer, and he was funny as hell. I would ask or tell anyone listening to look up that video. It was just maybe 2 or 3 months ago. And Burt Reynolds was very, very funny. He was very entertaining. Talked about his career and I guess it was predetermined not to talk about his current conditions, but you can't help but not to notice that Burt Reynolds was in a real frail condition. And like many others, I was able to put that aside and listen to the words that the man was saying. He was very coherent. He was aware of what was happening. And I guess I couldn't help but to think about, my grandfather who passed away at the age of 90, God rest his soul. And it was just, amazing. Amazing is not the proper word to use, but it almost is, because as I mentioned there about him appearing on Conan, to go from that to, the last few days he had with his family and friends, who I'm sure was with him until the end, and just have a complete 180, and that's kind of what reminded me with the last few moments I had with my grandfather. One day he's all happy and hunky dory and telling jokes, and standing up from his chair to give you a hug and want to give you a kiss on the cheek, to just literally watch taking his last breath. And it's a very sad time, and a really hard blow to the, I guess, Hollywood community. As mentioned in the statement from WWE, Burt Reynolds was definitely an icon and a very big deal. And I was even more of a fan of his when he appeared at WrestleMania 10 alongside Donnie Wahlberg and Rhonda Shears. He introduced Rowdy Piper as a special guest referee in the main event for WrestleMania 10. So it's a lot of tie-ins there, and it's just, I guess, ironic and amazing. Again, there goes that word, how everything ties in at some point in time, where at least here I talk about someone passing from Hollywood, and he or she may have a connection with the pro wrestling world. And just goes to show us how times have changed, and when pro wrestling did go mainstream, and that it spread out like that, and its effects are still being felt around the world, and may or may not have some kind of influence in the change of direction of said actor in their career moving forward. But good to know that many fans like myself didn't forget about him like that. There were a couple of movies that he was in that I enjoyed, as those mentioned, even in the WWE statement, and many others. I particularly liked Driven, and if anyone's seen that Stallone movie where he plays on that, not a NASCAR racer, but very similar setting. And Burt Reynolds was one of his old trainers and partners. And then unfortunately, his character was in a car accident and was wheelchair bound for the rest of his life. And man, how Burt Reynolds can deliver such a performance when the character requires to be very upset, very pissed off, very angry at Stallone's character. If you haven't had a chance yet, I say check out Driven with Sylvester Stallone and Burt Reynolds. It was pretty good for what it's worth, but unfortunately then there was, I believe, a NASCAR accident at the same time of its premiere date, where a driver lost his life on the track, and there was like boycotting not to release the movie, but one had nothing to do with the other. It was just coincidence that it was involving the same business, but the movie carried on regardless. But I think because of that connection with the fatal car crash, it wasn't as successful. But it's not the first time something like that happened, where art imitates life or vice versa, and the other one, it always gets affected more. But just want to thank everyone for joining me on the JM Report here. I hope everyone enjoyed their Labor Day weekend. I know I did, with the All In event, and upcoming much more this week. Hopefully get to find out more news on Evolution pay-per-view. Yes, I didn't touch on Raw, SmackDown this week because I thought there were not good shows. The Mae Young Classic kicked off this week on the network. I didn't get a chance to go to see it yet, but I will this weekend, and hopefully bring you the results leading up to the finals that will take place at Evolution. So if you haven't yet, check it out, but I'll definitely speak about it here next time on the JM Report. Once again, everyone, thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. Enjoy your upcoming weekend. Hopefully the kids went back to school nice, prepared, and ready to go for the next 150-something days of school. And be good, be well, and I'll see you next time.